Hello, my name is Michelle Holloway, and I am pastor of the Baker and Haynes United Methodist Churches in Baker City and Haynes, Oregon. This message is for November 7th, 2021. It is titled, Our 2 Cents Worth. Hear this reading from Mark 12, beginning with verse 38. As Jesus taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and, for the sake of appearance, say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." Reach into your pockets or purses or piggy banks, whatever you have, and pull out the first 2 coins you can find. Hold them in your hand and imagine that these, and I want you to keep holding them, imagine that these are the last 2 pieces of money between you and starvation. You're a widow with 3 children to feed and clothe. Your husband had no brothers who would have been obligated to take you in, and your own father is dead. It's just you and your children standing together in hope. What do you do with these 2 coins? In our gospel lesson today, we were invited into a disturbing but familiar situation. Jesus was giving warnings against the scribes, the experts in the law. He pointed out how these men liked to be noticed. They wore extravagant robes because the longer the robe, the more important the person was. And these scribes wore robes so long that they couldn't have been in a hurry to get anywhere, and neither could they have done any physical work because of the robes. They expected to be treated with deference, greeted in the local store, given the seat of highest honor at a meal. They manipulated the poor into supporting them, even when the poor had nothing to give. The scribes destroyed people's lives. After giving a warning about the dangers of these men, Jesus sat down to do some people watching. We really don't get many incidents of Jesus just watching. Here he was, sitting and observing, and what he saw was a number of people who came to pay their support to the temple. Rich people came with great sums of money. They made an elaborate show of how much they were giving in support of the temple. As he watched, a very poor woman came and put in just a pittance. We don't know how he recognized her as a widow, but it was apparent that she didn't have much. She may have been accompanied by several small children, or she may have come alone. Whatever the circumstance, she gave her last 2 coins. Why do we think she did that? Was she expecting something in return? For the rich people who made a show of giving their vast amounts, they had already gotten a return on their money. They were admired and looked up to for being people of value and worth. But this one woman gave all she had. She could have kept one of the coins. It might not have been much to ease her plight, but it would have helped in some way. Do you still have the 2 coins in your hand? It's all the money you have in the world, and the offering plate is coming around. What do you do? This woman chose to give extravagantly and passionately of the little she had. She gave her all to the work of God. She put in her 2 cents worth. From what Jesus told the disciples, those 2 copper coins that wouldn't even add up to 1 penny were worth more than all the other money given that day or any day. She gave her 2 cents worth and gave more than anyone else. 2 cents worth. Have you ever wondered where that expression came from? After reading Mark today, we might think that the phrase comes from the Bible. However, there are other possibilities. For almost 50 years, starting in 1883 and going until around 1930, the cost of first-class postage in the United States was 2 cents. When a person wrote a letter, they were putting in their 2 cents worth. A letter sent to a newspaper editor, the president, or a corporation took 2 cents to mail. People paid the price of postage to have their ideas known in places that mattered. Nowadays, we would be putting in something over 50 cents worth, but I don't think that phrase is likely to catch on. Another possibility for the origin of the phrase is that 2 cents meant that what had been written had very little value, whether from lack of content or simply the modesty of the writer. Oh, it's not much and it may not mean anything, but I'm going to put in my 2 cents worth anyway. Often it's meant negatively. Oh, I suppose you're going to put in your 2 cents worth now too, implying that we've had enough of other people's opinions and we're tired of everyone butting into our lives. Going back to the 2 cents in the scripture, the rich people put in much more than their 2 cents worth and were filled with pride over what they had done. Certainly, God had blessed them abundantly that they would have the money to give so generously. But in truth, they weren't any better off for having done it. They were giving out of their abundance, and it didn't cost them a thing. They would never miss that money. They would always have more. It didn't hurt them to give. It wasn't a sacrifice. They only did what was expected of them. Then the widow came along and put 2 coins in the treasury. Jesus watched as the woman put in her 2 cents. She was very quiet as she did this, not wanting to draw attention to herself. She would have been embarrassed if anyone had seen her meager gift. Was she careful not to be noticed? She would have witnessed the displays of the scribes on the streets and the rich people giving their alms. She just wanted to give her portion and be on her way. She was giving out of duty and for some other deeper spiritual reason. She was giving sacrificially, and it cost her dearly. Jesus saw her act of charity, and he was blessed by it. This woman had given her all. How many times are we called to give all we have? We live well in comparison to many people in the world. We may not live in extreme luxury, but we do all right. Would we be able to give our last or our only 2 cents, 2 coins to help further the gospel? Most of us will never have to find out the answer to that question because we're comfortable and we'll always have enough. Are we touched at all by what this woman did? Do we think she was foolish? How many of us would hold back one of those coins we are now holding tightly in our hands? Have we ever thought that what we give in money, time, or service to God through the church can never come close to the value of what the woman gave? Why is that? Because in most cases, we don't give to the point of sacrifice. It doesn't really cost us because we've spent time figuring out just how much we can give to the church without putting our own budget into a bind. Give until it hurts. When was the last time any of us did that within the structures of our faith? Do we know what we're missing by not giving beyond our comfort level? The monetary value of this woman's coins was practically nothing, but the value to her soul was beyond measure. We put in our 2 cents worth, but just what is it worth? Do we ever think of it that way? Is our giving worth something? Are we giving from a thankful and generous heart, even if what we give doesn't compare with what anyone else has given? It's easy to believe that the value of our gift is small just because the amount is small. But that's not the way it is. Jesus assured us that the widow put in more than all the other people who had given. 2 cents? How can that possibly be more than the rich people gave? Our motives tell much about who we are and what we believe to be valuable. For the widow, the observance of this act of obedience was obviously very important. We know that God honors obedience. She obeyed and gave all she had. She gave beyond what would have been expected of someone in her circumstances. So, by that, we can surmise that what the rich people gave, though much welcomed in the treasury, didn't hold the same value. In fact, that's exactly what Jesus told the disciples. He said, "This poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury." They had given out of their abundance and it hadn't cost them a thing. She had given out of her poverty and it cost her everything. For the moment, let's look at these acts from the heart of the receiver. These people, the rich ones and the widow, were giving to God out of what they had. The rich were very inappropriate in their actions, in their showiness, but they were still giving to God. They too were being obedient. So what's really at stake here? Real giving, true giving, that honors the call for us to participate in God's mission in the world should never be easy. It shouldn't be comfortable. The amount of what we give doesn't matter nearly as much as what it costs us to give it. Giving is intended to be sacrificial. This counts for all kinds of giving, not only monetary, but in all the things we've heard about over the past weeks. Are we sacrificing anything through our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, or our witness? Real generosity gives until it hurts. Do we ever sacrifice for the work of God, or do we simply say, "Sorry, I don't have the time or the money"? The story of the widow and her 2 coins should stir up some guilt in us. Have we ever given extravagantly to anything outside of children and grandchildren on Christmas morning? Is that the only sacrifice we're willing to make? Real giving is reckless. As mentioned before, the woman could have kept one of her coins. Not much, but it would have helped. Are there areas in our lives that we are unwilling to give to God? Is there some part, some activity that we don't want God involved in at all? Those 2 coins in your hand? As you have the opportunity to give today, will you give them both or hold one back, just in case? When will we let go and finally surrender everything to God's mercy? See the beauty and freedom in this woman's act of reckless sacrifice, her gift of extravagant generosity. William Barclay wrote, "We may feel we haven't much in the way of material things or personal gifts that we could give to God, but if we put all we have and all that we are at God's disposal, then we can step back and watch the amazing works that God can do with our goods and ourselves." Be reckless in giving completely to God out of the abundance with which God has blessed us, no matter how small the amount seems. Well, that's my 2 cents worth. Amen.